Well, it's been substantial. There are 1 million to 1.5 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and that is a significant population expansion in such a short period, in a short period of time. Just to get a sense of the scale, its estimates suggest that this is roughly the equivalent of previously projected expansion over the next 20 years. And so any economy would face considerable pressure when faced with these conditions. And Lebanon is a developing country, and it does have pre-existing structural challenges. To take one of those, it's public services and infrastructure. Lebanon has historically had protracted underinvestment in public services and infrastructure, and public and service delivery systems have come under considerable strain as a result of increased demand from Syrian refugees. As a result, there have been service shortfalls, provision shortfalls in certain areas. There have been quality deteriorations, and upward pressure on government spending at a particularly difficult time for the government. Labor market has also come under significant pressure, with an estimated 30 to 50% increase in the labor force in a short period of time, which has led to the doubling of the unemployment rate to unsustainably high levels. And there's been a disproportionate cost that is borne by the most vulnerable participants in the labor market, especially the young and the unskilled. It's important to note that so there have been significant negative effects on the Lebanese economy. But it is important to note that there is evidence to suggest that the Syrians are supporting private consumption and investment in Lebanon, and that this will work some way to turning back those negative effects. Now, what the net effect will be and quantifying that in particular would be difficult to do, and is also particularly difficult to do because the Syrian refugee crisis also comes in the larger context of the Syrian crisis more generally, and the knock-on effects it has on investor confidence coming through regional instability and uncertainty as well. It's very difficult to say which country has paid the higher economic price. I mean, we do see relatively similar effects in both countries. Annual growth rates have tumbled from their pre-crisis levels to about 2% at the moment, which is well below their potential level. This has had knock-on effects on various parts of the economy. We've seen adverse debt dynamics, particularly in Lebanon, where public debt to GDP levels have risen after a decade of progress on this front. Besides that, job creation is going to be a problem for Jordan, or has been a challenge for Jordan in the past and will be a challenge in the future. In this low growth environment, the private sector has historically struggled to create enough jobs for new entrants and enough high quality jobs in particular. And so there will be challenges on this front going forward. We also see a lot of disruption in trade networks in both countries, especially overland trade. Syrian, Lebanese exports, overland exports anywhere but Syria have practically come to a halt. Jordan has suffered additionally because of the closure of land routes to Iraq, which is a significant trading partner. And so exporters within this low growth environment have also had to bear an adjustment cost related to finding alternative routes for their target markets. I would be hesitant, however, to rank one above the other because there are particular conditions in each country which could also influence growth that might not be comparable. It's difficult to isolate the effect of the Syrian crisis from say, the protracted or prolonged political stalemate in Lebanon, which would have its own separate effect on investor confidence and consumer confidence. And Jordan has its particular conditions as well. So taking a one-for-one comparison in that sense would be very difficult. Well, Syrian refugees in Lebanon, or the registered ones at any rate, have settled in the regions that have the highest levels of poverty in the country, particularly Ba'a and the north. And indeed, I mean, they were over 1 million people who are estimated to have been living below the poverty line, and estimates suggest from the World Bank's an estimate from the World Bank suggests that an additional 117,000 Lebanese people could be pushed into poverty as a result of the Syrian crisis and its spillover effects. It's not unreasonable to think that if this situation were to continue, and if some serious economic recovery does not happen, that social tensions would rise considerably. Trends in youth unemployment are also worrying for various reasons. The effects of excluding the young from economic networks can manifest themselves in unpredictable ways in the economy and in society more generally. In addition, finding informal work would be, in many cases, a poor substitute to finding a proper job in the formal sector, since there is a lot of social anxiety that is involved due to the uncertain working conditions in the informal sector, over and above the limited potential for skills acquisition that they may have to progress up the income ladder and to improve their standards of living and those of their families. And this is also happening while the government is in a tough position, and because of the elevated debt levels that I mentioned. There is very little fiscal room for the government to enact any extensive redistributive policy that might mitigate the social impact of the economic downturn. And so it's a very uncertain situation all around. That said, Lebanese communities have proven to be remarkably resilient in the past, and they have weathered the current crisis so far. How things progress from here on out will depend on the ability of the recovery, when it does come, to create jobs and employment across a broad range of Lebanese society.